Have you guys seen how all these people are freaking out over this show Severance? Like, really analyzing it and hyperfixating on the details as they await the return of the critically acclaimed office hellscape colloquially known as Severance. Couldn't be me, though. It couldn't be. And since they were releasing episodes week to week, I guess Apple is trying to reintroduce patience to the human race. I, in rebellion, was going to wait until all the episodes were out. I wasn't going to touch a single one until they were all released, so then I could do the honorable thing and binge them all at once. Picture this: me, a glass of water, a small bowl of baby carrots, and 10 hours of uninterrupted television. I was imagining myself with much more restraint than I ever utilize in my day-to-day life normally, so obviously I failed. Obviously, the first episode came out and I was like, wait, what's my line? Not watch the show for 2 more months. I failed because the show is good. The show is very good. For the uninitiated, Severance is a show about a group of people who undergo a medical procedure in order to split their consciousness into 2 distinct parts. One part for work, one part for home. And each self knows that the other exists, but they don't have any of the memory or knowledge associated with their experiences. One self works at a company called Lumen and sorts mysterious data and gets to get snacks from vending machines, and the other lives at home and watches TV and cleans out their gutters and stuff. One self gets to poop at work in a stall, and the other self gets to poop in the privacy of their own home. One self experiences psychological torture if they step out of line, and the other gets to eat diner food. 2 equal halves making up one whole person. At the start of season 1, we see the steadfast obedience of the office Innie suddenly fractured when one of their co-workers, Petey, abruptly leaves the company. Because in the game of Severance, you work or you die. Leaving work isn't just leaving work, it's kind of killing off the soul version of you that existed there and that these people came to know and care about. Staffing shakeups feel as emotional as dealing with the death of a loved one, while Lumen management is parading around the idea that this is not the case.
I think this is a good time to remind ourselves that things like deaths happen outside of here.
Flop. And then on top of that, our protagonist Mark must immediately onboard Petey's replacement Helly. And Helly is not happy to be here, not excited to be severed, not thrilled with the idea of re-waking up in an elevator every day wearing a pencil skirt. Are you kidding me? If my lower half was constricted to a pencil skirt for all of eternity, I would also be threatening acts of violence. If I worked at Lumen, my first perk suggestion would be Pajama Day. I think Pajama Day could really be a game changer. I think it would boost morale in a way they could have never anticipated. The uncertainty of what's happened to Petey, coupled with Helly's defiant and dissatisfied spirit, leads Mark's department into a camaraderie so powerful that they hatch a plot. They riot in an attempt to let the public know of all the human rights violations that are being committed against them, but they cease to remember the second they step out of work. They do this by pressing some buttons, flipping some switches, pulling some levers, as any great heist is achieved, resulting in the Innies becoming conscious on the outside. And this all happens at the very end of season 1, and there's this big build-up and there's revelations, but the biggest revelation is that Helly R, rebellious, righteous, resplendent Helly R, is the daughter of Lumen's current CEO. And they don't call her Helly, they call her Helena. Nasty Helena. Evil Helena. She's the latest kin in a line of power-hungry freaks, and she only underwent severance in order to be able to spew bizarre proof-of-concept propaganda. And this all happens, and then season 2 begins, and we are dealing with the fallout of this uprising. Lumen strategically co-ops what happens and spins it as a positive thing for the company. They're like, you told us you didn't want to be abused anymore, and we answered, how about more snacks? Systemic change who? Let's focus in on the perks specifically. Our weird, demeaning perks that you guys love because you effectively have the consciousnesses of a 5-year-old. You want salsa in the vending machine? Did you guys notice how in the video they show that none of the perks they introduce are actually perks at all? In season 1, the perks were like dancing, crystal cube, waffles, melon 2, giant snake, birthday cake, large fry chocolate shake. And then in season 2, they're like, major reforms alert. We're giving out hall passes. Last I checked in season 1, everybody could wander the hall, so you guys are actually monitoring that more closely. Pineapple bobbing, which is giving a not fun. At the very least, getting cold and wet while being tied up at work. And at the very most, a waterboarding kind of vibe. Thanks, I'll take a finger trap actually. And of course, a mirror room, which is just office mandated panic attack. Even the snacks that they're adding have a nefarious undertone. Fruit strips, beans, mince, and salsa? Does Lumen have Tostitos? Was Lumen already equipped with Tostitos chips? Because otherwise, that's a slap in the face. If you guys don't have Tostitos scoops, you can keep your damn salsa. And then, of course, the biggest perk of all being the reveal that they can leave work whenever they want. Your outies don't decide whether you come back. You do. How empowering. But remember, in the game of Severance, you work or you die. Milchick may as well say, another perk, you guys can go end your lives. Do you want to go end this existence as you've come to know it? You guys can now do that whenever you want. And despite all this weird shit we see at the end of season 2, episode 1, our core 4 deciding to stick it out and get to the bottom of what Lumen is up to. Except, Helly was weird, right? Helly's kind of off. First watch, I was like, yeah, for sure, I can be sold on the gang getting back together. Second watch, I was like, oh no, they've done something terrible to our girl. First watch, I was taking Severance at face value. You know how like Milchick is describing that private perk to Dylan of being able to see his family, and Dylan's like, family visitation room, does that mean I could visit my family at work? And Milchick is like, if you take the name of the thing at face value, yes, absolutely. I was doing that with Helly. I was taking Helly's presence at face value. I'll have to admit, I was unsatisfied during my first watch of this episode because when you take Helly here at face value, what you get is a poorly written woman. You get a woman who is asking very basic questions in this high-stress situation, pointing out things that seem kind of dumb to be paying attention to here specifically. Based on the evidence we are presented in season 2, episode 1, the interactions, the questions, the deceptions, I would say this isn't a theory, but rather indisputable truth that this is not the Helly R we have come to know and love, but rather evil, nasty Helena Egan entering the severed floor as a spy for Lumen under the guise of being her coworker's closest confidant. Now that's diabolical. Now that's masterful. I've created a list of the most compelling things from season 2, episode 1 that support this claim. Number 4, Innie continuity. In the show, the outie to Innie to outie transition takes place at some point in an elevator ride of Lumen's office building. And rather than go too hard in the sci-fi, technical CGI arena for this, Severance relies more on the changing focal length of the lens and the actor's facial expressions to convey this transition. Essentially, what's happening here is one consciousness is waking up while the other goes to sleep, but there's still some continuity required for how the consciousness that's waking up last felt. When we last saw Innie Mark in season 1, he was yelling life-changing revelations to his sister, so appropriately for his return in season 2, he's a little shaken up. Irving was yelling after his workplace love interest banging on his door, so here he's yelling and banging on a door. Seamless. Dylan stayed behind to do the button-pushing, lever-pulling thing, so he was never in the outside world, but the last thing that happened to him was Milchick tackling him to the floor after he cut his belt. So when he emerges in season 2, he is obviously hung up on losing a great belt. He's like, what happened? Did our revolution work? I just lost my favorite belt. What's going on? Where's Milchick? I need to talk to him about a belt. And then Helly. Oh, Helly. When Helly was last awake, she was disclosing Lumen's abuses in front of a crowd at a company conference. She yells, "They torture us down there," is tackled to the floor. So when she emerges in season 2, she runs out of the elevator? I'm not understanding. She was pushed to the floor, so her next action would obviously be her running full speed on her feet. Your feet immediately start going? Like, was she just like hitting her ankles against the floor? I don't get it. Just not quite as a continuous flow as with the other characters. Even weirder is when Mark hugs her. If you'll remember in season 1, the last time these two were together, Helly sprang from the elevator in an act of the world might be ending kind of love. She planted a big old smoocheroo on his face. We're about to rebel against this international corporation. Something terrible could happen to us. The time to kiss is now. So obviously when they reunite in season 2, her face is filled with such emotions as shock, surprise, What is that? Like she was just grabbed by a stranger? Notably, the absence of relief that you would perhaps expect her to have. She's returning to the arms of a loved one after a harrowing experience. Here I'm getting kind of like a surprise hug from a cousin at a family party, and you didn't know that they were a hugger, so you're like, oh, okay, hi. You may think I'm getting too in the details with this one, but Severance is a show about the details. Come on. Irving was told in his wellness session that his Audi loves the sound of radar, and then it turns out his dog's name is Radar. Severance, stop it. Can't keep getting away with it. Colbell stole a candle from Mark's basement, and then a few episodes later we see it in the office. I think this is a show that's interested in the details. I think this show demands scrutiny. Number 3, the quality of questions. If there's one thing to be said of Helly in season 1, it's that she ruptures the environment of the Innie's docile compliance by introducing them to the novel concept of asking a question, following up, participating in discussion, as opposed to what they were doing before, which was just like smiling and nodding and behaving like bots. Helly asked the best questions, and these weren't your grandma's everyday questions. No, they went right to the top. Some of my favorites were, am I livestock? Like, did you grow me as food and that's why I have no memories? Am I dead? This isn't like hell or something? Then why the fuck can't I leave? So how are you going to figure out these numbers? Okay? Do we even know what we're supposedly cleaning? Am I trapped here? Did O&D ever try to kill anyone? Then why don't we ever hang out? So what are we, like a Densmart person? Don't you see how fucked up this is? You get the idea. Helly is asking questions on the global scale. She's thinking big. She's questioning the system. She's asking creative, complex, open-ended questions that show how goal-oriented she is. What is the goal, of course? To get out of there. Season 2, episode 1, not so much. In her reunion with Mark, she asks exactly 3 questions. Did you wake up? How long has it been? Where is everybody else? Which, sure, you can give the benefit of the doubt and say she's just confused and returning to a situation not quite knowing what's at stake. But I don't want to give out the benefit of the doubt, especially considering that Helly joining Lumen at the beginning of season 1 is under very similar circumstances. Her waking up, confused, entering a situation not quite knowing what's at stake. And that's when she came up with the livestock question. Season 1's confused, am I livestock, versus season's 2 confused, where is everybody? Where are they? The characterization is off, don't you see? These just don't seem to be the same person. Helly's more thoughtful than that. She's asking nothing of the system, nothing of what Lumen is up to, which was like the whole thing she was interested in season 1. For the remainder of this episode, she's only asking questions that pertain to what is directly in front of them.
What the hell was that?
Or just regurgitating what someone had already said in order to get more information out of them.
So they replaced us? What did you see? So what are you gonna do? New people.
Flop, 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 flop. I mean, especially with the so what are you gonna do about Miss Casey question. Helly in season 1 wouldn't be phrasing it like that. She'd be like, okay, so how are we gonna help her? How are we gonna help Miss Casey?
Can we help her? Is there anything we can do?
She doesn't ask him in season 1, what do you think happened to Petey? What do you think you're gonna do about Petey? She says, how are you gonna figure out if Petey's okay? It's clear that she thinks that, like, something should be done there. So it's like, okay, let's move to the next step. Let's get to the how and the why. She's efficient. She's a planner. But instead here, she's just letting Mark take the lead on what they should do. Very odd. Very odd. Don't like it. Seems weird. I don't know this girl. In season 2, episode 1, we see a significant dip in the quality of the questions she's asking. She's just prompting people to get like basic information out of them because she's Helena. She's trying to get them to lead and she can just stay back and not show her cards. And then at the end of the day, report to Lumen higher-ups. Number 2, she's taking things at face value. Similarly to how Helly introduces her constituents to the idea of asking questions, she also shows them that you do not have to accept the information presented to you as the absolute truth. Just because Lumen says things are a certain way doesn't mean that they are actually that certain way. And sometimes those things that are presented are worth investigating a little bit further. We saw this over and over and over again with Helly in season 1. It was really like a cornerstone of her character.
You're just done asking about your best friend because our babysitter told you to stop? It's important because it actually is or because you're saying it is? Who's to say there are security guards? I've only ever seen Grainer.
There's code detectors.
Do you know that? Have you tried? Because frankly, it sounds made up.
Better yet, we see her efforts here pay off. In season 2, episode 1, when Dylan tells Irving he can't leave until the end of the day and Irving says, are you sure? Season 1 Irving would never. Oh my gosh, look at him questioning the information presented. And so when information is presented to the characters in season 2 episode 1, it seems very odd that Helly of all people would be taking that information at face value.
He said there were no microphones in here.
Weird. Weird that you're so in tune with what Lumen is saying in regards to security and recording, Helena. Frankly, her whole attitude towards the security measures being loosened is a clear indicator she's a spy. One of the first things she does when she's back in the office is point out that the main security camera is missing.
Wait, what happened to the security camera?
Okay, great, so what? Does that really change the name of the game? Are we not dealing with the same company we were dealing with before? I've noticed now too, when she says this, we're looking at the back of her head. Like, I feel like if this was truly Helly R, we would see her face taking in the information, but instead we're just seeing a talking head. There's an angle to what she's saying. She has an ulterior motive by pointing this out to them. Helly R wouldn't have bothered to point this out because she knows that just because Lumen took away the most conspicuous security camera doesn't mean they couldn't have put new, tinier, hard to see security cameras in the vending machines and the bathroom stalls and their eyeballs. Who knows? We don't know what they're capable of. We haven't even been in the office for like 5 seconds and she's like, oh, look, all the cameras are gone. Let's talk about all our little secrets. Anyone want to exchange secrets? The same idea goes for when Irving runs off because he wants a moment alone. Helly's first gut response to this is, shouldn't we go after him?
I'll talk to him.
No, we should all go.
No, he's fine.
Shouldn't we all, we should all stay together because I can't watch all you guys if we aren't all together. I can't spy on him and you guys if we aren't all together and go everywhere together and do everything together because we're little babies who need to be watched and I'm Helena Egan and I run the company. When Irving ran off in season 1, Helly didn't care. She was like, oh, okay. I guess he's on a different journey. I guess we'll just figure it out, me and you, Mark. No reason to go after this fully grown adult man. That's not my prerogative. She's behaving like the babysitter she berated Milchick for being. So if this is Helly R, I do not get it. It's not my girl. This is not my girl. And before I reveal my final piece of evidence for the Helena as Helly R theory, honorable mention, of course, to her just completely lying about what she was doing on the outside.
I was watching some nature show on TV.
First watch, I saw this and I was like, oh, she's just like super embarrassed to be an Egan. She's so mortified to be an Egan that she came up with some silly story about her meeting a gardener in the wintertime. Helly, I'm sorry you feel this way, but your story has a few plot holes. And then second watch, I was like, oh, she doesn't want them to know that she's an Egan because if they know that she's an Egan, maybe they could at one point put their brains together and realize she's like a weapon that could be used against them. And obviously nobody wants that. Number 1, catching Helena playing the part of Helly R, slipping out of character in this one very specific, very short, very small moment. AKA mismatched stakes. Now, there's a lot of payoff for a viewer in being able to see a twist through. Once you understand the twist, you can go back and rewatch the whole show and it becomes something totally different. You can recontextualize all these moments. Now you're in on it and you get to appreciate what the actors and directors and writers were truly doing. And there's plenty of moments like this in season 2, episodes 2 and 3 that I'm not even gonna get into for this video. All I'll say is that moment between Helly and Mark in the hallway is not awkward because they're bashful about their love. It's awkward because they're strangers. They don't know each other. Mark just doesn't know it yet. But the evidence I'm about to present is a bit different. It transcends context. There is such a thing as slipping something into the background. Because here's the thing. If I was returning to work after publicly outing a company's most controversial and damning secrets, my eyes would be a bit wide. I would be engaged and really wondering how that first day back at the office was gonna go. But with the Helly we are shown, her behavior does not match the stakes of this predicament she is in. You could say all my previous points tie into this, but I want to focus here on Milchick. I've mentioned him a few times before, but just to be clear, he is the manager on the severed floor, and he is a man that everybody has learned to fear.
Yeah, Milchick's a nice man. When he says something, it's best to listen.
I don't care.
Because he can't always be nice like that.
He's got that facade of corporate happiness, but can easily slip into something a little bit more unnerving. He's performing pleasantness. It's very weird. It makes you want to go, ooh. He's a scary dude, and in season 2, he's been promoted. Quite concerning, if you ask me. So when he gathers this group together for their first post-uprising meeting, you can bet I would be on the edge of my seat. I would be curious to see how my volatile supervisor was going to be managing things going forward. And in this moment, and perhaps the most important moment of her career as she knows it, this very existence, Helly is zoning out. Girly is bored. Huh? She has to snap herself back to attention. Oh, was the overt corruption from the company you work for and this meeting being led by the person who carried out your torture not enough to pique your interest? Not enough to get some adrenaline surging through your eyeballs? This is not the response of someone who has been through the experiences that Helly R has been through. She's zoning out because she's bored, and she's bored because this meeting has no stakes for her. Helena Egan has probably already been briefed beat for beat on how this meeting would go. She was probably upstairs during the brainstorming sesh. Milchick was probably like, I think at this point I'm gonna tell them that I value them as people. And Helena was like, yeah, and make sure to let them know that the company is listening to them. It's an excellent blink and you miss it moment. It's put in there for the people who are rewatching the show and trying to understand where they missed the twist and what was happening and how this all happened right under their nose. And I just happened to rewatch the show right after the first episode premiered. And that's it. Your Honor, that is it. That is all the evidence I have. At this time, the defense rests. And I bet your next question is, Olivia, have you considered the alternative? Have I considered that? This isn't Helena, but truly, yes, Helly R, and she has debuted season 2 in a more redundant and reductive fashion than we could have ever imagined. I have, but I don't like it. Have I considered that the writers forgot how to write a woman? Have I considered that the Emmy-winning television program, colloquially known as Severance, took 3 years to give us a worse woman? I really don't want to, because at face value, this is how she exists. Forwarding the plot along for the sake of the other characters, getting no insight or understanding into how she actually feels on what's happened to her. All her questions and comments working to center the men around her. Helly's not a planet, she's the sun. Helly's not an orbiter, she puts other people in her orbit. If we learned what we should have learned from Helly R in season 1, it's that you don't take the information presented to you from the all-knowing, powerful entity at face value. The show is manipulating us and our viewing experience with the presence of Helly just as much as Lumen is manipulating the other Innies with the presence of Helly. In the eyes of Severance the show, we are Innies too. Because we don't know what the fuck is going on. Failsafe options if my theory is wrong. Helly is truly so embarrassed to be an Egan that she got a personality transplant for the 2nd season. She is so mortified to learn that she's corporate that her personality just flatlined. She's depressed. Helly depression arc. Could be a red herring. Could be all a red herring for the depression arc. I've never made a video before where I don't have all the information, so this does feel like a risk, but I've justified it in my mind because if I am wrong, that means that this just goes from a TV analysis with maybe some insight to a cultural time capsule. Years down the line, people can look back and be like, oh, look what people were saying about Severance before we knew what was actually going on in Severance. I'm a historian. Program colloquially known as